Hey guys, it's Nichole Eaton with the Rock Your Soul book and podcast, where we talk about how to hack your mindset, grow your intuition, and live your best life. You can support this podcast by subscribing, leaving a positive review, and screenshot and sharing on social media. Welcome back to the Rock Your Soul podcast. I'm your host, Nichole Eaton, author of the book Rock Your Soul, the Down to Earth Guide to Mastering Your Mind and Soul Therapist. Today, I am so excited to have a guest joining me, somebody who is incredibly interesting, super into talking about the energy of spaces and to create better energy. I have with me Feng Shui consultant, Jess Neary. Welcome to the podcast, Jess.
Thank you so much for having me, Nichole. This is an honor to be here with you here on Rock Your Soul podcast.
I'm so excited to have you. So Jess is a Feng Shui consultant, and I'm so excited. So Jess and I actually met on Clubhouse through a mutual friend that we did a room together. And I was just so fascinated by what you had to say about your living space and using Feng Shui that I had to have you on.
Absolutely. Yes, well, Feng Shui is just so beautiful because it fits in with so many different mindful practices and, you know, practicing intuition and manifestation, which is the Clubhouse panel that we were on talking all about. And I feel like sometimes the Feng Shui or looking at our environment is often overlooked. And so there's so much opportunity and potential here to amplify the efforts we're already putting in, the daily practices we're already participating in, just taking it up to like a whole other level.
I love this because I love thinking about how it ties in because I don't
Yeah.
necessarily correlate like my space with manifestation. So I definitely want to get to that. So for people who are like, what the heck is feng shui? What would
Yes,
you tell them?
absolutely. So, feng shui is a practice where we're looking at our environment and we're creating an energy flow by looking at our space. We could be decluttering, we could be rearranging furniture. Oftentimes, we're looking at also what we're looking to add in our space. So, I personally really enjoy working with plants and crystals, natural materials, and so feng shui, it kind of touches on all these various aspects when we're looking at designing our space, but bringing that intuition, the mindfulness in to boost the vibes. Now, feng shui began over 4,000 years ago in China, and this practice was reserved to those of royalty and royal descent. So it wasn't something that um, those in home dwellings really knew much about. And originally, it was used to locate auspicious burial grounds to honor those
Oh,
inner, yeah, to honor those who've passed. And looking at the land, I mean, there's so many different aspects with feng shui. Now, in the 1970s, Professor Yin Lun had brought feng shui to North America, and this is when kind of, I think of the hippie days in the 70s with liberation and freedom of speech, and our civil rights really became um, really, or we really progressed quite rapidly in those areas. And that's when this westernized version of feng shui came into our essence, really. And it's the specific feng shui that I practice and that I've studied is called BTB feng shui. And this is incorporating practices that are using the standpoint of wherever you're at, and you yourself are kind of the guide in the entire process. And for those listening and those, or even yourself, I mean, certainly for myself, when I had heard of feng shui many years ago, it was associated with the compass direction, so where we're
huh.
seated or how our home is oriented in relation to northeast southwest. And since, I mean, and that's the classical traditional approach to feng shui, which is still very prominent in the world. And but the BTB feng shui is really incorporating some transcendental cures and looking at like I said, ourself, and using that as the guide or the jumping off point for consultations, for looking what needs to shift in a space.
That is fascinating. And I love that it was used for royalty because I'm a
Yeah.
little bougie and like just that makes me feel like extra when I think about it.
Yes.
Um, but how do you even get into this kind of profession or learning more about it? I mean, obviously, like
Hmm.
someone like me, I've noticed like I don't do well with things being cluttered. I've really become a little bit of a minimalist over the years and try to keep just enough of the things that I need in my space. And I know that and I've recognized over the years that has impacted me when I don't have that clean and clear. But how do you get into kind of going down this rabbit hole of just learning
Hmm.
more about the space and learning how the energy in the particular functions of a room?
Yeah,
What's your
absolutely.
story?
Yeah, it's a big story. Um, well, I mean, it really started when I was very, very young. And my bedroom growing up was like my sanctuary. It was my safe space. And I always went through the space, keeping it decluttered, um, making the bed in the morning because it just felt so good to me. And it's also something that I was able to control because within my reach, it was something that I could um, work with. And I from a very young age, was moving my room around consistently. And it was in high school when I started to recognize my sleeping patterns and my behaviors with receiving this deep rest. And it was in correlation to how my bed was positioned, which was like fascinating. I remember I moved my room around, hundreds of ways, as many times as I could with the furniture I had. And there was one evening where I had my bed actually, my the back of my bed was facing the door, and I had my dresser behind my bed to kind of create, a little dressing area that was separate from where I'd be sleeping. And I had the worst sleeps. And I think it lasted maybe 2 weeks before I quickly changed the bed back around. And so it was this kind of experience and understanding that I started to develop from, I mean, I would say from a very early age, and recognizing how our living spaces really affects us from an energy perspective. But putting those together, it intrigued me even more, and it just kind of drew me into looking at our space. Now, when I was in high school, I mean, feng shui was just not on my radar, to study. Interior design, though, is where I felt so much passion and this calling towards. And so after I had completed my business administration degree program at our local university, I worked or I went to school for interior design. During this whole process, I kind of had, no, not kind of, I had my spiritual awakening. And this is where I started to develop, where I was at in this world, and my own perspective, my values, my belief systems. I also became a mother, which was this very pivotal moment in my life where I was now creating a nest for our family and our growing family because we now have 3 young children. And I was beginning to practice Reiki, Qigong, yoga, meditation, because I was looking at creating that balance within myself. And naturally, looking at our environment, our home space, starting to recognize these correlations. And that's when I thought, there's got to be a way. There's a way for sure that we're going to be able to incorporate energy healing with
Yes.
our interior design. Yeah. And that's when I found Feng Shui and studied with the Earth Home School of Feng Shui and Mystic Arts with Tisha Morris, Feng Shui master. And from then on, it's our home has shifted so much. And when I say shifted, I mean almost every square inch of our home has been transformed in the past 4 to 5 years. What's interesting is that ordinarily I'd be changing my room up all the time, almost like trying to find the right key to fit in the keyhole. But now that we have our home set up with feng shui in mind, furniture is staying the same. And there's just these minor shifts and subtleties that are now taking place, which I'm so relieved by. I feel like there's this strong foundation, and it's very reflective and apparent in my life, my business, my children, and being a mother, and certainly supporting my husband as well with his profession and his life and his personal energy too. So it's been this really beautiful, uh, I want to say, unfolding in my life. And it's been such a pleasure to share this also now with clients and see and recognize the shifts that they too are experiencing, which I'm going to say 10 out of 10 times, like 100% of the times, they themselves are going through a transition and just looking at shifting their space to help them through it as well.
What's fascinating is even when you were talking about like being young and switching your bed around and then not being able to sleep,
Hmm.
it's just something that you don't think about, that like even the direction intention of where your bed is located matters to your energetic health, wellness, and like sleep.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's that's wild. But I always love stories like this, and I always love to ask people like their journey and their story, because a lot of times our purpose and the things that we're most built for and meant for have been slowly guiding us there. And I
Mm.
never think there's a straight path to anything. I always think there's like a stair step, and each stair step has the pieces that we need to take from it to get into our next stair. And I love how even just interior design, it kind of led you to Reiki, that led you to
Yeah.
Feng Shui. Like, how beautiful is that to have that, you know, shift right into it. So, um, I would love to talk about like what are some practical things or things people can think about in regards to their own home right now today, of what can they be doing or thinking about to make their space more functional, to make them feel lighter, to feel better.
Absolutely. It's And it's always like, where do we begin with feng shui and looking at our home space? And there's a few different approaches to guiding where to begin. For generally, I say look in the bedroom.
Okay.
Um, Look in the bedroom because we spend majority of our life in our bedroom. If we're thinking in one particular area, we're in this space 8 or well, I guess 6 to 10 hours every day. So any changes that we make in this space, which could even be including or bringing some awareness or self-awareness to the space and really acknowledging and being grateful for what is working well, is this beautiful way that we create these shifts that create massive ripples throughout our life. And I mentioned the bedroom because that is really, I think, where I began even as well. But the way that I look at this is if we have our bedrooms set up to support us, then we have the energy levels and ability to really move forward with a strong momentum in all areas of our home and life. But sleep is such a foundational um, need that our bodies need to rejuvenate, to feel refreshed and re energized, to help process day to day activities. If we're going through any big emotions, like I would identify myself as a highly sensitive person and empath. And so sleep is vital to my health and my
Yes.
energy levels and, just my general attitude and mood. It's um, really strong for connecting with others. So parenting, being there for my husband, clients, and our community in any capacity. So when we start in our bedroom, one of the first practical tips that I would recommend is looking at your bed placement. And I think this is just like the best jumping off point. Um, and looking at our bed, and there's this really well-known position that can also be applied to other areas in your home, but with the same premise of having the headboard and your bed placed against a solid wall so that when you're laying in bed, you're able to see the entrance to your bedroom without being in direct line with the door itself. And it's interesting because the doors into our spaces really are like these portals of tunnels of energy coming in. And so, whether you have your door closed at night or whether you have your door open, if we're unable to see the door, constantly through our mind, we'll be thinking of, you know, who may be coming in the door, is it going to open, or we're scanning our space. And this is a very primal instinctive nature, to want to be able to see if there's any predators coming at us. And so when we even think of sitting at our desk space, I'm sitting at my desk right now, I'm able to clearly see the entrance to my space. My daughter is home, she's upstairs, so I don't have to think, oh, is someone going to come up behind me? I have that vantage point. And the term for this placement of the bed and for your desk as well is called the command position or the power position. And so this is like a very fundamental, basic placement of our bed. And having our bed in this place really just allows us to sink in even further and have a deep, more relaxing sleep. And it's not something that anyone would ever learn about or hear about in interior design, but it was through Feng Shui that I got this deeper insight as to the importance of placement of furniture.
Jess, this is so fascinating to me, and I'm like scanning through my bedrooms right
That's
now. Like,
perfect.
I'm like, okay, where is my bed? And that makes total sense because even sleeping in like an Airbnb or something, that is
Hmm.
something that I feel
Yeah.
very aware of. Is not
Hmm.
only the energy in the space, but if
For
something's
sure.
set up in a way where it feels odd, or I feel like I'm hyper aware of
Hmm.
the door or the windows,
Yeah,
or just something is like too in my line of sight, it's harder to sleep.
absolutely.
I've never like considered that as like an energetic uh connection. That's so
Absolutely.
interesting.
And funny you mention, Airbnbs, or I found we would stay in vacation resorts or in our hotel. And like one of the first things I do is rearrange the space.
Oh my goodness.
Sometimes. I mean, a lot of the times, the beds, I mean, I can't move the beds, but the seating arrangement, or 2 weeks ago there was a coffee table and it was just sitting in the middle of the walkway into the room, and I was thinking like, oh no, that's got to move. it's blocking the energy from coming in. And so every time we were coming into a room, we'd have to walk around this obstacle essentially. And so it's quite fascinating. It's very fascinating.
I love that, and I love thinking about even just things coming into your room,
Yeah.
as a block. Like, if you're walking into a
Yeah.
space where you're kind of, like, running into an object,
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
when you changed everything around in your home, like, what are some I
Yeah.
know you talked about, like, feeling more strong in your foundation, but what are some other things that you noticed about just making those shifts in your furniture or in your space?
Hmm. Well, and even talking about or kind of expanding on blocks in our space. Now, it's it's very evident when we look at our space if there's blocks that we may be experiencing from our own perspective in our life. And I'm getting to the personal example of this, but our home and our space is a direct reflection of ourself and where we're at. And it's quite fascinating because then we can look into when we recognize these blocks in our space or in our life even, we can start looking at our space and thinking, now it's in my awareness and I can shift them and do something about it. Oftentimes it could be furniture that could just be moved in a certain orientation in our home. I'm thinking of, for a prime example of this, is looking at, we literally took down a wall in our kitchen space, and this wall served zero purpose for ourselves And I think it really was just in the design plan from when our home was originally built and constructed. And at the time, which was 30 years ago, you know, rooms were more closed off, I want to say.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
right. And now we've got great rooms where everything is open to one another. So you can be in the kitchen and communicating with guests in the living room or your children or partner or friends. And same within the dining space as well. And for us, this wall, it was just a small wall, but it prohibited even natural light from coming into our kitchen. And so we removed this wall. It was one of the things that we have done in the past 2 years that's made this huge shift and huge change. Now, to understand, now, I mean, of course, taking this wall down has opened up so much energy in the space that we then benefit from, especially in the kitchen. The kitchen is the second or one of the other three most important areas in our home that affects our or influences our personal energy. But even understanding the location of where this wall was in our home space in reference to one of the feng shui tools, and the tool that I'm kind of like skirting around is called the Bagua map.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if you've heard of this. This is like uh, very mind expanding for listeners and for yourself, Nichole, is the Bago map is the tool that we use in feng shui to look at our entire floor plan of our home and understanding where different areas of our life are being reflected in our space. So in this particular example of our kitchen is located in the fame and reputation area and also our health and well-being area. It kind of was like in between there, which I find incredibly illuminating because there has been so many shifts in my own outward recognition, in my fame and my reputation as a mother, as a community member here in my local community, but even in my business and with Jess Neary Feng Shui. Um, within the past year, I've had this major growth in social media with followers, with engagement, even with those whom are following me, and just really building that connection and that relationship there even further. And then looking at our health and well-being, which is the center of our home, no matter what space you're in, it's always in the direct center, kind of the heart of the home. And this is an area that is reflective of your health, mind, body, and spirit. It's connecting you to your balance and to your essence and to your core, essentially. And within the past 2 years, I have grown personally leaps and bounds at understanding my values, my beliefs, and just stepping into this power within myself. And it's just been fascinating to witness the shifts in our home at the same time as in our life. And what I've recognized is by being aware of these shifts has actually like amplified the effects tenfold because then it's just so much easier to move forward with facilitating these shifts and sharing, for sure, sharing the shifts as well, because I gain so much knowledge and inspiration from others when they share their stories. So I'm grateful to be able to share mine.
This is so interesting, and I'm thinking about how you were saying, the kitchen being the
Mm,
second kind of
mhm,
space you really wanna pay attention
absolutely.
to, and I'm just so grateful to have such an open floor plan, but I was thinking about how you were talking about it coming here in the '70s and then even how choppy homes were in the
Yes.
early, 30s, 40s, 50s, right? So
Hmm.
I'm curious on your thoughts of this, but I had this full circle moment where you were talking about that coming here in the '70s, there being a ton of forward progression, but I'm also wondering if I look at the 30s, 40s, and 50s as a time of like
Yeah,
secret keeping, like family
for sure.
secrets. We don't
Yeah,
talk, we don't express our emotions.
absolutely.
And now we gravitate towards open floor plans, but I also feel like there is a lot more just general
Yeah.
openness of. So, do you like feel a correlation with
Mhm.
that?
Oh, absolutely. Like no doubt whatsoever that these changes that we're feeling as a collective and the collective energy, I mean, around the world, and even more so now, I wouldn't say with technology and, just the simple fact that I believe we're on opposite sides of North America and we can meet up and have these conversations and connect in this way is reflected in our spaces. And looking at the history of architecture and interior design, which is where I really began this whole, well, not began this whole journey, but it was a big part of my journey, especially looking at the educational side of things. It's very fascinating. Like looking at the Victorian era and the spaces and the detail even that went into these homes, very ornate, and it's very interesting to see how we've evolved in our
Yeah.
home spaces to these open floor plans, streamlining, trim in our spaces, and yeah, having the big open rooms. It makes a big difference.
Well, and it's even interesting because I used to flip houses in New York. I lived in New York, and so we would take these old homes and
Hmm.
renovate them. And even I always found
Yeah,
that we were knocking down walls and we were
of
creating
course.
intentional open space. But I also noticed that ripping up the flooring and
Yeah.
putting new flooring down reset the
Hmm.
entire energy of a room. Like even if it wasn't carpeting, even if it was just like old tile or
Hmm.
laminate, like removing the
Absolutely.
flooring just completely, and it's like, okay, I don't know why that worked, but that like it just felt like something totally shifted, or it was like out with the
Yeah.
old and with the new.
Oh,
What are your
definitely.
thoughts about like
Yeah.
painting or
Hmm.
taking up carpet or
Yeah.
what do you think about all of that?
Well, when we, because our, like I mentioned, our home was 25 years old when we purchased it from the previous homeowners, and the flooring, I mean, well, the intention of receiving this home and purchasing this home was to do a full renovation because I'm very particular with what I'd like to have in my space, and it just gave us that opportunity to live in a space and grow with it in a
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely.
And when we were taking up the floors, because they were laminate, old laminate, or they would have been like, 20 years old perhaps, or 15 years old. It was very indicative of the 1990s, like the first type of laminate flooring that had ever come out, which was like the beachy, yellowish kind of color. And as we were pulling up the floors and I saw them there sitting there, I actually was very emotional. And it just felt like well, it was an honor to be able to, well, in a sense, clear the energy that had been held there previously. And our homes are very intuitive themselves, and you can definitely think of them as like an energetic being in itself. But it just felt this overwhelming sense of pride with respecting, the previous homeowners' decisions, the intentions that they would have put into the space and infused in through the flooring. Flooring is major for foundations. It's literally the foundation or the ground we walk on in our space. So it was really important to myself that we had put in hardwood flooring, like real hardwood floor.
Yeah.
And even though we had young children and a dog and cat and, but this maybe even more so wanting to have this connection to nature rather than a manufactured product. But laying down the new flooring, it's the feeling is just so, I want to say awakening is the word that comes to me, but very powerful, very, very powerful. And I mean, the flooring is, and same with our walls, and I'll definitely get to, the wall color and painting the space even physically, but our floors are something that we can offer so much gratitude for, really.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're using every step we take is on this surface, and just acknowledging that can really just amplify the vibes in your home and your space. And, I mentioned earlier on in our episode here that, just acknowledging the things that are working really well in your space and bringing that awareness to the space really amplifies the the vibrations and the positive energy in the space. And I feel like our floors are that one other area where we can really bring our attention to. And it's quite powerful, powerful stuff.
I just think, like you were just saying, the
Yeah.
appreciation of a space. And
Hmm.
when I was in New York, I had an office with one of my best friends. And every time we would walk into the space, we would say thank you because we were so grateful to
Mm.
finally have a space because we worked out of a really tiny office together for a long time. And and it became kind of a practice for us to just be grateful, and we had people who would come sit in our waiting room just because they liked the feeling in there. And so I think there is
Yeah.
something really beautiful about loving your space,
Hmm.
being
Yeah.
so grateful for it and for what it does for you,
Absolutely.
and allowing that to radiate. And I also have found, even just, I know you're going to talk about, paint colors and painting the
Yeah.
walls, but one of the things, I was at a coffee shop a couple of probably a month ago now, and I was like, oh my god, I love this space. This, like, it's so pretty, it's so aesthetically pleasing, like all the details. And so I came home and I was like, I want all the details of my space to just be things that make me feel so happy to be there. So I
Yeah.
started kind of going into different areas of my house and just fine tuning little pieces and little details that I wouldn't. And I just feel
Yeah.
even better, making the space
Absolutely.
everywhere I look just aesthetically beautiful, in a space I'm so happy about and so proud of and so grateful for.
Absolutely. Oh, you say that so beautifully too. There was, and that's what's wonderful too, is that we have this opportunity to be inspired by spaces that we visit. So, I mean, I often will say, if you're looking to create a certain vibe in your space, where do you like to visit? Is it outdoors, in nature, like in a forest setting? Is it at the beach? Is it, what does it look like? What does it feel like? And then bring that similar energy then into your space. And I mean, Pinterest is a beautiful place where you can look for inspiration and start to learn what feels good to you if you're in a capacity where you're not able to physically go out to a space. Instagram, of course. I
Yes.
love Instagram. Love Instagram because I'm such a visual person, and I'm sure you are as well, Nicole. It sounds like it. And
Yes.
so it's yeah, it's nice to be able to connect with those that have beautifully curated Instagram pages and, you know, feel inspired by that as well. Yeah.
Ugh, this is so interesting. You were going to talk about, I want to hear about just paint
Mhm.
colors and
Yeah,
finding the right energy within coloring.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, color psychology or color psychology, color therapy is such a powerful motivator and influence on our energy. And even going back to the example of where you like to surround yourself, is it in the forest? Is it at the beach? You know, paying attention or bringing awareness to the colors that you see in the space as well is really indicative of what your space could feel like that as well, by bringing these colors in and kind of drawing inspiration from these spaces. Now, when we look at painting our walls, like this is literally the backdrop. This is the backdrop to our life. And painting the walls covers a large surface area. So there's so much potential here to bring intentionality and feng shui into your space and into your life. We originally painted our home when we first moved in like a light gray. And I think that was probably a really trendy color at the time. And I know now we're stepping more into like an off-white wall space, which I also find very interesting to follow trends.
Yeah.
Very interesting. It's very indicative of kind of where society or collective is at in the grand scheme of things. And it's going to change, it's going to shift. Um, Painting the walls is one of the easiest things that you can do to create an overall shift in a space. And selecting a color, I mean, there's so many different ways on incorporating different colors in. I love the off-white colors. Saying that is kind of with like an asterisk. The the white and the off-white and even gray is a very metallic or a metal element color. And with feng shui, we're learning also, or it stems from traditional Chinese medicine. So looking at the five elements is just another way to help describe the energy in our space and aligning our space with ourselves or ourselves with our space. And white and that off gray is the metal element, which has certain characteristics like very structured, very detail oriented, very organized. And that is a fantastic trait to have. For some people, it just might be too much and it could lead to, perfectional or a trying to be a perfectionist or perfectionist tendencies. So you can kind of look at the colors in your space and see where you can bring again more of that intentionality in. So if you're looking to soften the space because white could be quite stark, and bringing in soft pink, could be bringing in a peach color or even brown to help ground the energy in the space. Blues are also a wonderful water element to come in and work with the metal element of the white and light gray. So there's different ways of seeing how colors can work together as well. And now our home, like I mentioned, started with like all light gray walls, and it was great for a little while, but then it started to feel too dark. And when I was stepping into more of a lightness within my own life and my own spirit, really wanting to brighten up our space as well. And so we went with like an all white. We went to the lightest shade on the color deck, and it really brightened up and expanded the energy in our space so much. And we had this color for about a year. And then I decided to just create an accent wall. And so we brought in this beautiful peach color that's in our great room right now, like with our kitchen, dining room, and living room. And it just brings in this earth element, which feels like a warm hug. It really does. And just one wall, we still have, white curtains. We have white shelving. I really like the clean line and the organized, feeling of the metal element of white and the grays and that. But pairing it with this peach wall just provided this amazing complementary energy that now you walk in and you feel joyful. And although you're clean and you're organized and structured, but there's also this other element that's been added. So it's quite fascinating when we look at colors in our space and the energy that then brings into our life as well.
Here's what I love about what you just said
Mm,
is that you talked about growing with the colors of in having them be a reflection as you grow, and I absolutely love the thought of that. It's so interesting. I have a new build home here. I've always had really like
yeah.
kind of wild or brighter colors. Like I have a pretty big personality, and so like even in my office it was like peach and teal, and like it was just like
Wow.
alive. Okay, so
Yes.
when I moved here, it's like a frosted white color in every part of the house.
Mhm.
Everything is frosted white, and I at first was like, should I paint this? And I was like, it just feels so good and open
Yes.
and light and airy, and I love that feeling. And it's
Yes.
so interesting. I keep looking at certain parts or certain rooms and saying, I wonder, but I don't feel called to yet. And so I
Nope.
love that, maybe there will be a time where I warm it up in a different way or ground
Sure.
it in a different way. But I love the
Yeah.
idea that you can kind of reassess as you grow into your space and your space grows with you, to see what energy you would thrive off of having in that time.
Absolutely. Like
So cool.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and two, I mean, we painted an accent wall peach, but it could even be by bringing in certain imagery through artwork, right? And so if it's a rainbow or, like a very abstract painting with different colors, there's so many different ways too that you can bring in those different elements into the space. Yeah.
This is so fascinating. I'm gonna need to have you back so that we can like continue this awesome conversation. But
Yeah.
before we go, I really wanted, you talked about manifestation in your space. Like, is
Hmm.
there a quick tip or thought you can share in regards to manifesting and feng shui?
Absolutely. So with the law of attraction, we know that like attracts like. So certainly having a space energetically feel like the vibration that you're stepping into or whatever it is that you're looking to call into your life through the manifestation process. So considering how does it feel to you once you have achieved this manifestation, and kind of using that or kind of feeling into that energy and then bringing that into your space, it amplifies things tenfold. And there's this really beautiful example that was given actually on The Secret, which is like sparked so many awakenings around the world, including myself many years ago. And this was a tip from Marie Diamond, a feng shui expert as well, who's known internationally. But she at the time was working with Steven Spielberg and said, um, he really wanted to work in his home office and bring in more fame and reputation and success. And so the advice that she had given to him was to hang posters of previous work in his space that brought that joy and that passion and that inspiration. And so he put up these posters in his room. And this is something that I say or offer to entrepreneurs all the time. Is if you're looking to achieve greater success in what you're doing, you already are successful no matter where you're at. Let's start there. But wanting to expand on that, look at the pieces of or content that you've created that you really feel, was like your best self stepping forward. And then putting it in your space so that's reflected there so that you are constantly influenced by the energy that was even behind that content creation. It's just fascinating too when talking with entrepreneurs, or it doesn't even have to be an entrepreneur. Actually, the last client that I worked with that I suggested this to, she was just working in her home office. She's now working from home like many of us are in the past year. And I had mentioned, well, what have you done in the past that you really enjoyed? And then immediately, her first thought was this design she had created and said, perfect, let's put that up on the wall. Let's frame it so we can see it. And it was just like the sense of pride. I want to say ownership, but just pride and of the accomplishment that she had done in this space, or, for this project that she had created and content that she's put out in the world that's like it's still getting recognized and used 20 years later. And I think we can all do this in any space, really. Looking at what we want to manifest, but having that imagery in our space of how it feels, what it may look like. If we want to manifest a trip, I'm going to use myself as an example, manifesting a trip to Yosemite Park in California. I'm going to here soon print a photo of Yosemite Park and have it in our home space. So it's that constant influence and attraction that's easy to achieve.
It's like a vision board, but your home.
Completely.
So
That's
cool.
my phrase I use, is that our home is the ultimate vision board.
So cool. I actually, now
Yeah.
that you mentioned that, I feel like I remember, I want to say it was Wayne
Mhm.
Dyer talking about how
Mhm.
when he would write, he would just
Yes.
pile in his room best-selling books, and he would just
Absolutely.
sit and write with the energy of best-selling authors, intentional
Yes.
energy of writing in his space. And so I love this. Like I said, I need to have you back.
Mm.
Where can people rush to book a consult with you?
Absolutely. The best place to book a consult is at my website, which is jessneary.ca. Super, super simple. And I've been, a few different package options, but we can definitely book a 15-minute call just to see where you're at and how I can best help serve you and your space, and what kind of consultation package or option would work the best. But I'm very active on social media, so you can definitely find out more about myself and my energy and how I approach feng shui and my personal experiences, which I share on Instagram. I'm on Instagram all the time. I absolutely adore this platform and this space to share. Yeah.
So fun. Thank you so, so much for sharing your wisdom. I hope everybody rushes to their home and just looks around and then contacts Jess so she can help you create an incredible, beautiful space for you to live your life in. But thank you so much, Jess.
Thank you so much, Nichole. It's been an absolute pleasure to join you in this beautifully sacred space and sharing the wisdom and knowledge of feng shui.
Thank you so much for listening to the Rock Your Soul book and podcast. Take a moment to book a one-on-one session with me or purchase my trainings at NicholeEaton.com. Join the Rock Your Soul Facebook group or follow me on Instagram at NicholeEaton.xo. And if you loved this podcast, don't forget to share it. Thank you.